Souse us therefore in the powdering tub of thy mercy,
that we may be tribes fit for the heavenly table.
Welcome, Meatsmiths. You are listening to a Meatsmith Harvest, restoring husbandry to prosperity
by means of the traditions of our fathers. This dialogue picks up where we left off in our last episode's conversation. You can find part 1 on our website, YouTube, or iTunes. If the content resonates with you, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/meatsmith and donating a small monthly pledge. This goes directly toward more free media headed your way. Thanks for staying tuned for part 2. There's a lot of other states we could have chosen from. We happen to have some connections already in Oklahoma. And like we said, we can't really afford a rural area in Washington State right now. So we kind of had to escape the coasts. And escape's not the word either. Just we had to really narrow it down to our own budget and cultural needs.
Yeah, and I think I remember having this debate actually way back in my college days. You know, where there's this weird assertion that art is a non-essential. I remember debating this with a person, and I'm an English major, so I was studying poetry. And I was just like, oh man, what did you just say? You know, and it's in the end, it is I mean, everybody knows we're not materialists, but if you are, then your highest good is something wrapped up with material existence. And there's just more than that. And like a culture. And that's a big deal. That's humongous. In fact, it's kind of everything. And you can even go to, someone like Friedrich Nietzsche, that you can endure anything if you have the proper why. There is this immaterial element to society that can't be reduced all the way to atoms and stuff, that is actually the source of life for that society. And if you shut it all down, then you're cursed to merely endure. And that's not, to me, that's not a life. That's not living. And so it is this automatic arrival in this place where things are all of a sudden we have the hubris to judge the traditions of our fathers, our entire cultural inheritance for centuries. We can decide what is essential and non-essential based on data, on metrics that we make up, but we don't think we're making them up because we're objective materialists and we think everything we do is objective. And that is that's real bad. That's actually that's the end of civilization. Not to be hyperbolic about it, but that you can't do that. Because we've received what is essential. And that's not some abstract, arbitrary judgment that older is better. It's no, we always say this in the class, that's the data. You want empirical data? How about what people have done for centuries and millennia? Chesterton calling it the democracy of the dead, right? And it's to think, to me, it all just shakes down to the basic modern hubris, that because of our sensitivity of our instruments and the fact that we've convinced ourselves that our interpretations and our worldviews don't even exist anymore, it's just objective observation, we can judge everything that came before us by our own metrics, be it whatever, and I feel like that impulse to judge everything that came before us has recently been given the teeth to very quickly alter society. And so that's, I've got children, and when I think of raising them, I have my priorities for them. And they're growing at the speed of light. And so And the best thing that I can do is give them a culture that is based on a cultus, to steal from one of the a good scholar that we like to follow, Timothy Flanders. And that cultus is based around the right worship of God. And everything flows from that. And you can see this inscribed in the landscape in old Europe, you know. And we've talked about this before. This is what I saw in Devon when I got to visit there, is small towns. Smallness is a thing. It's called subsidiarity. And there's there's a hill. On the top of the hill, there's a church. And there's a town around the church. The market is right there in front of the church. And then there's homes around that. And then there's farms and small fields, no bigger than 10 acres all around that. Everything is scaled to the human scale. But at the center of it is that elemental gesture of reverence that orders everything that flows from it. That is the tradition, that's the history that gave us much of our culture and much of it, all of its parameters, even up to like the presumption of innocence and all these very basic legal principles that we still adhere to. That freedom is even a thing that is not conferred by a government, but actually part of human nature. So all these things we inherited. And I just, our rush to label them as essential or non-essential is literally the essence of hubris. It's just the essence of that. So,
no, we've talked about, maybe, I don't know if we have completely, but yeah, what you just said, the whole idea of the medieval village, how it is laid out, and America never got this really. Maybe certain parts did.
Yeah.
Well, California did actually, because they were settled
some of the missions
before the eastern coast. But anyway, yeah, you have at the very center, so even in the middle of the church, is the altar.
Right.
And on the altar is a tabernacle where the Lord resides. And it's not off to the side, although in some modern churches you might find that.
Yeah.
But it's in the middle, and when you enter the church, the architecture is such that your whole orientation is directed towards it. And then there's just concentric circles going out from that.
Right.
Even within the church building, there's certain things, there's side altars maybe, or the pews themselves. They're kind of symmetrically oriented, but directed toward it, and your whole vision and everything, your senses are just oriented towards it. And then you go right outside of that church, and there's the next layer of civilization, and then you have the fields, and then you have but the whole village idea, it's almost like moderns we've returned to the village somewhere in the mid 20th century. We lost the village, and now our generation's no, we want the village. And we're trying to be and then some of us have even tried different iterations of villageness or community, and it's just not quite working. And we're scratching our heads why isn't it working? And the Catholic claim is that we have to have that cultus, that worship, and then it's the first things settled, the right worship, and then you get to have all these wonderful village blacksmiths. You get to have the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem, which is beautiful, and you get to have the cobbler and the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker, and everyone's in unity. And I mean, there's squabbles, but we're united because there's Christ right in the middle of it. So, and then you have all the other sacraments, which when you do have your squabbles, you go to confession and you get healed, and things. And I know it's not perfect, but that's because we're here on earth still. But it's this vision of the heavenly banquet table. And why did I go into that? You were talking about just the idea of getting your priorities right. And that's what we found. So, the cultists. So the culture, and so much of what we are trying to aim at with all of this, the meat hanging, from the rafters, and the pretty music that we try to have on our media, it's culture building. And
it stems from the cultus, which is, I think, that's like the central ritual with which you worship, and worship is, we don't have, it's not, you can define it really concretely. It's just that thing which you think is worthy to offer something that is of ultimate worth. So what is that thing of ultimate worth? Because so then it kind of makes sense, right? That which you think is most important, you're going to put time in, and a cultus is going to develop. It's going to be around that, and everything's going to flow from what you think is most important, what you think has most worth. You just can't underestimate, again, the abundance that will result from that orientation. So it's exciting to think of getting out there. It's less exciting to think of how I'm going to get out there. There's some puzzles.
How we're going to unknit this shop is...
We'll figure it out.
Someone's asking if we're moving near the Abbey. No.
Well, we'll be within an hour and 20 minutes of it.
That's true. We're within striking distance.
Relative to the commute we've been making. I call that near.
That's true. You're right.
That's near.
I know. There is, our friend here on Instagram is talking about Clear Creek Abbey, which is a wonderful pilgrimage site, and monks pray there every day, and
it's a Benedictine monastery.
But yeah, we'll be 10 minutes within the there's a fraternity of the Society of St. Peter Parish in Tulsa, so we're 10 minutes away from there, which we're really excited about. There's something else I was gonna bring up. Why we're moving. We talked about freedom a little bit.
I was actually reading about just kind of the way our intellect works, and there's 3 virtues of the intellect. I was reading, as I understand it. One of them is understanding. One of them is science, and one of them is wisdom. These are intellectual virtues, which means they're habits. So they're not necessarily, though they can be augmented, they're not just accidents of birth, or supernatural gifts. They're actually habits that you can build in through repetition that reside in the intellect. Understanding is the one we really lack right now. And it's actually the one that a materialist scientist perspective is a priori, as a premise, excludes from being possible, which is the gift of understanding, the intellectual virtue of understanding, is being able to retain knowledge of first principles. And principles are first principles are even just of nature, of natural law, not esoteric mystery knowledge. This is just basic stuff. And understanding is the habit of holding those in your brain, of holding those in your intellect. So you're always kind of aware of them. We tend to assume that we have this sort of from Locke, but others, and even just the way I would argue that practically our epistemology works today, we eliminate the condition for first principles. There are no first principles. We're either blank slates, or we observe things with our instruments are so sensitive in observing things that we assume we're seeing the thing itself, undiluted. And the precision with which we see it, whatever object we're observing, gives us the authority to tell other people what it is and how they should live related to it. That's a philosophy 101 problem.
That's true.
Big time.
Yeah.
So understanding is a virtue of holding first principles in your intellect. Science is holding the reasons or the proofs for individual things in your knowledge. All the time. Holding those in your intellect.
The data points.
Yeah, and particularly the why and the reasons and the proofs. That's science, the intellectual virtue of science, as I understand it, from Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah.
But it's more particular. It's more, located to individual instances, holding the proofs. And then wisdom is, as Wallace can tell us, it's a relish for the things of God, for the divine plan. It's the deepest kind of knowledge.
Okay.
That is, I think, probably most augmented by divine revelation, and but it also involves a relish, a love for those things. But just those, to think of the intellect as having these three possible virtues, and it is so much more a full view of the intellect. We've come to kind of limit it to your intellect, your argument is worth nothing unless it's all proofs. And there is, which is ridiculous, because if the proofs require a first principle, which is proof matters. That is a purely metaphysical, philosophical assertion.
That's right.
That cannot be scientifically proven. And so these really basic philosophical errors. And, there were some even secular postmodern theorists that were talking about this. Because it's obvious, if you've taken any philosophy class, that this, unfortunately, tends to be the way we run the world, is we have to prove everything. We only accept the scientific form of knowledge, which is a virtue of the brain and can be useful. But we forget that you actually, if you're going to have proof, you need proof for your proof. And those are philosophical principles. That, truth even matters. That matter, knowing what a thing is composed of materially, even matters at all, or is even discoverable. Those in itself, those are all metaphysical presuppositions. I can't remember why I'm talking about that. Oh, habits of the intellect. But all that to say, there is just when we emphasize the scientific form of knowledge, which again is a virtue, and I don't even think it's practiced as a virtue anymore, but you know what I mean. When we emphasize that excessively to the exclusion of others, I think you get the situation we're in now, where science is effortlessly leveraged as propaganda, either way, because it's untethered from a substrate of principles that are understood. So now it's just this hyper powerful tool that can be used by both sides of the spectrum to do anything they want. So you gotta have your first principles.
Well, many scientists have substituted scientism for science. And they are making philosophical leaps that are not in the science. They're not really being good scientists by sticking to the matter. They're making these metaphysical assertions that that material is all there is. And many scientists, they know their place. They know that the difference between making a scientific observation and maybe even a hypothesis and a whole experimental trial on things, but then you don't make assumptions that matter is all there is.
Yeah, well, and I think even if you're going to be really strict about it, science can describe.
Right.
End. That is the end of what science
Full
can
stop,
do.
yeah.
And technically, as far as prescribing, you've left the realm of science. You've entered into metaphysics and subjective judgments and interpretations.
But I mean, I was in the science schools in the university and the graduate schooling that I did do, and I went through the whole scientific process of creating a hypothesis and an abstract and setting up an experiment for myself and creating a testing population and then questionnaires and then I found out my conclusions and I wrote my whole thing. And my takeaway from that whole thing was that I can really bend this to go wherever way I want it to go. And I can really make it look objective too. And that was a neat lesson on my part, The hunt is up. How many people do you know you would say truly share your back to the land values? Or your passion for home-scale craft meat curing? Or simply love the multifaceted beauty of a good meal as obsessively as you do? Maybe a handful? At farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we've created an online community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world and a platform for them to learn from and inspire one another. In addition to our major semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Pacific Northwest homestead, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources years deep now, for you to dive deeper into your food journey with. And both our classes and online program include access to our private community Facebook page for your continued education and fellowship. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you, putting the knife in your hand, article by article, and comment thread by comment thread, and can support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today. That doesn't discredit all science.
No, yeah.
But you just have to be really careful. You have to make sure that your first priorities line up with the science that you're going to look at. And just to be fully aware that just because something has a peer-reviewed journal behind it doesn't make it objective. And it's just funny because we live in maybe a particular part of the world too where everyone's got a degree or maybe a graduate degree, and if you've got these things and you appear like you know what you're talking about, especially when a worldwide pandemic hits, and you're like, well, I kind of know how to read too and make my own conclusions and take into consideration all the factors, which are multivaried, but we're told we can't really think. So,
that's why I've always bristled even at the notion of curing recipes.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and they're useful as time capsules. So definitely make recipes and record things and use recipes, but understand that they are not mathematical. And that's the thing is, if you want to confer the utmost legitimacy upon the thing, when you're proposing it for people's knowledge, make it look like a math equation. Because mathematics is incredibly precise, or it is precise, period. Like it's 100% precise. And, but empirical sciences use math as a tool. They are not math. Math, in fact, is abstract, fundamentally metaphysical. Anyway, but the recipe itself too is, when I look at a curing recipe, my problem with it is not that, it hems me in too much. It's like a straitjacket. I want to express my creativity and give everybody botulism because that'll be fun. Like that's not That's not why I don't like curing recipes, and I've never done that, by the way. I don't like curing recipes because they are imprecise. Because they have literally taken an infinite quantity of data and by their, what's the word? Selection prejudice, rejected 99.99999% of the variables just to be able to begin to write this tiny little thing called a recipe. So you ipso facto, before the fact, you have to reject an infinite number of variables to be able to write a recipe. Ergo, you're getting the tiniest window into what it is to make a ham. And yes, it might work for you. It might work most of the time. But if that's given so many controls, again, that put a very strong parameter around those variables through the use of curing chambers, controlled environments and all of that. So you've just limited all the variables. So yes, you can make ham from this pig with that weight, with that much salt in this exact environment, and it'll still probably be too salty, honestly, but you can do it. But in the end, the much more valuable thing to you is, and I would say the more precise thing, is to understand the broader context, the principles of meat curing. You need to have the habit of understanding what water is, what flesh is, what salt is,
osmosis,
what they do to each other. And you need to bring in your own senses. Speaking of being empirical about this, because all knowledge comes through the senses, which is another fundamental basis of all empirical sciences, and also another metaphysical presupposition. If you use your senses when you're making the ham, you're gathering more data that is directly pertinent to your ability to eat or enjoy that ham. And but if you shackle yourself to the recipe, you're missing out on all of that, and ultimately settling for something that is less precise, not more, even though it has an appearance of precision, right? Because it's ham plus salt, pork plus salt equals ham. Boom, mathematical precision right there. That's what a recipe attempts to convey to you. And again, I'm not opposed to them. It's just you got to take them in context, and retain the virtue of understanding. Hold on to the first principles, because if it violates the first principles, then you know that there is an error in there. So yeah, that's kind of been my whole perspective on meat curing, also, and meat preservation, harvesting pigs, and all of this. You can read the textbooks and how to do it, harvesting cows and all of that, even raising all of these animals, and the official way to do it, and it will be backed up by lots of science, presented mathematically and empirically. But they have presuppositions. They're operating on certain principles. And if you're aware of those and you have your principles, then you understand, their scale is way different than mine. That's why they're saying to do this. You actually have more information to work with, and you understand the animal, the project, the process better. Because ultimately there is a degree of intellectual, and I feel it, there's ultimately that appearance of precision of a recipe is not, it can't allay any fears you have, and I would say artificially, but to a degree, but it's also just easier. It doesn't require trial or striving or doing the hard thing of developing a habit of understanding a thing. And so it's in the end it does appeal to our lethargy, and just knowing myself and the relatively limitless opportunities that will be seized by my tendency to be lazy. It's a constant battle to not just accept, because it has this facade of precision. You actually are going to have to go deeper, utilizing the principles and the virtue of understanding.
Which I think a lot of homesteaders, if they're paying attention, they actually are great scientists.
Oh, yeah.
And farmers get a bad rap sometimes for, I don't know why, actually, but
Oh, it's because the urbanites have to make fun of farmers
I guess so.
to compensate for their inability to do things.
But I just am so impressed at the scientific, the skills, the observational skills that farmers do have. And then that translates into philosophical mindsets too,
Yeah.
and metaphysical understandings, because they're using the natural world as an icon for the supernatural world. And if you do that, you know, you get good at understanding how the world works and how God relates to us and the hierarchy and all of that, because you see it played out on
Everywhere.
the world scale. Yeah. But yeah, I was just reminded of that funny story I told you this morning. Can I repeat it, or is that...
Yeah, it's fine. I don't know how censored some of these platforms are, but if we mentioned the particular medication,
You think that would
it could.
not
It'd
go
be
over
fun.
well?
It'd actually
Yeah.
be fun for it to be censored. I'm fine
Okay.
with that. That'd be fun.
Well, it was just funny, and it caught my eye because it has to do with Oklahoma, which we're getting ready to relocate to, and characterizing farmers in a certain way. And anyway, I was looking at the Epic Times, so I want to be clear about who I'm getting information from. And they were talking about Joe Rogan and how he contracted the beer bug. I'll call it the beer bug. And then he went into, as his wont, he tried all these alternative medicines. And one of them was a particular horse and cattle or just livestock.
And swine.
Oh, and swine. Dewormer. It's a dewormer, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Antiparasitic. Yeah.
Okay. And which has been a great way of therapeutically helping one deal with the virus that's everywhere and everyone's talking about. And anyway, so in the wake of this, there was the Rolling Stone magazine did an article, which may or may not be all that precise as a
Scientific journal.
exactly
Yeah.
right, but it does create culture. It does like build populace opinion. And so I read it, and it cited one doctor who is actually no longer working for the one hospital that he was working for 2 months ago, and it's unclear whether or not he's still employed, but regardless, he's only like part of a medical staffing group that is loosely associated with the one hospital, and it's in the article, the name of this hospital, but I can't remember it. But anyway, it's just one person, and he was saying that Oklahoma rural hospitals are being overrun by farmers who are overdosing
On the wormer.
on the dewormer to help them cure their infections. And so there's like ambulance cars lined up outside these hospitals because people with regular emergency needs are not being attended to. And the way that this one particular doctor was saying, it was so vague, but he was like, these farmers, they're so used to poking themselves with the
dewormer.
the
and a
dewormer
needle.
when they go to inject their livestock, that they are familiar with it. And so they just like overdose on it when they get infected
Because they're confident. It's like, oh, I've jabbed myself with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like the whole narrative just breaks down, because when you look at, and I immediately thought of this, I'm like, okay, Brandon, you've actually used this particular brand of
On some pigs.
what it is on pigs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how easy would it be to actually get that in your bloodstream? And
I'm not accidentally jabbing myself with a needle.
okay, even in like the worst conditions, like animals going crazy.
Yeah.
Are you like, at that point you stop trying to inject an animal, right? Or do you just manage it and you poke him and you get the the stuff in him, but you're not like, whoops, and you like slip and you get yourself, right? Does that happen?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
No.
But I was like, so anyway, that's supposedly happening, and educated people should know this, that these dumb farmers are like poking themselves. And then when they get a contracted virus of some kind, then they overdose because they're just so dumb. They just like pour the whole bottle down or something. I don't know.
They use they're dumb enough to use the livestock, the one that's intended for livestock, not for humans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They don't do their homework ahead of time, maybe under supervision, or
because they can't read the bottle where it says,
yeah,
this is for your cows. Not for you.
Yeah. Anyway, the whole caricature, I was just like, I can't believe that this is making at least some kind of national news, and we're supposed to believe this.
Yeah, that would only be compelling to an urbanite that has presumed
that has
rural people are stupids.
And they're not scientifically with it.
I know. You think about even like a large scale farmer, if they're giving dewormer to their cattle, they've got that worked out to a very high degree of precision.
Right.
They're not just jabbing themselves. Come on.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I want to be fair to the article, and you can find all this on the Epoch Times or go to the Rolling Stone article, but it was just like, I mean, you can just see they're not, even the journalism itself didn't seem very precise.
No.
And
that's what I was saying, is that once science is untethered, well, it can't be. Once we imagine that science is untethered from principles,
right,
then it is the plaything of ideology.
That's right.
It is totally, its prescriptions can be, and we've seen this, they can oppose each other from 1 minute to the next. It can be self-contradictory, and it can be used by the left or the right or anybody. It's totally untethered when it's untethered from first principles.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a very powerful tool of ideology.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. It is unfortunate. And I think I pointed out and I bring it up because it's an example of that, just narratives, I guess, running across purposes.
Yeah, people talking past each other.
Yes.
Because they are not on the same planet.
No.
Yeah, different paradigms.
Yeah, whoever wrote this article, whoever that doctor is that was talking this way, they obviously don't know how a farmer would treat his animals if he really cares about them.
And have you seen the needles you use to inject cows?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm not accidentally sticking that in me. Or even pigs, like the needles that go through hide, they're a little larger than the ones that go into, our soft pink human flesh.
Our skin, yeah.
Oh, that'd be horrible.
Yeah. So.
Very funny.
Anyway, but there's a lot here. And we're kind of jumping around and being scattered with our thoughts. And I didn't create like a whole list of things like I normally do, but I think we're excited to turn the page in a lot of ways on this property. We've loved this property. It's grown our family for a decade. But also the island, the property, the island, the state, they all are like constricting us a little bit too much. And we're needing to, I think because our intellects have been opened a little bit by getting some different teaching and formation, that we are seeing differently. The clarity has increased, I think, in what we're seeing culturally. And I think what Oklahoma has for us, what the parish over there that we know about has for us, is going to help continue our family to grow and the business.
Yeah, I'm excited about hopefully the opportunities we anticipate will open up for the business.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to employ people. We have one amazing helper that everybody knows that follows us or emails us at all, Victoria, who lives on the island.
Yeah.
She is wonderful and the exception, because it's tricky to live on the island and work for a small business. You probably have to work for like 5, just to be able to afford to live on the island. So we're hoping that through moving to a place with a lower cost of living, we'll be able to, and without the added cost of a commute on a ferry, we'll be able to draw from a larger pool of people to help us continue to generate content more promptly and regularly. Because that's the big bottleneck right now, is not quite having the help in that regard. Because I'm actually a much better pig killer than I am a film editor. I do a lot of film editing, but it's a whole skill unto itself, and efficiency is gained when you are good at it, as opposed to me, who's not. It ends up being inefficient, taking longer than it needs to. So we're hoping to expand that element of it too.
I think, and I hope that nothing that I've said or that either of us have said has been like a negative on where we've coming from, because you wrote it well in your newsletter a few weeks ago that this place has given us the foundation on a natural level of growing close to nature. And our kids, we see that they are running wild on this 2.5 acres, and wild in the best sense. They're learning the natural virtues here, and they're learning how to deal with each other. And so we're really, really grateful.
Yeah.
We truly are. I'm going to look fondly on my Vashon time. And the people that we've known here and the neighbors, and it's all been great. Yeah. And we're like transplanting to a different soil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else that we want to add?
Well, I don't know. Other than everybody stay in touch. We will stay in touch with you through newsletters, and when we get settled and start building things up. And particularly the opportunities for more diverse class offerings are going to pretty much be available immediately because of this thing called fencing. And a lot of these places in Oklahoma, they're fenced for horses, which is a humongous, skittish, powerful, emotional animal. And so the fencing is consequently quite stout. And I think it can pretty much fence every other farm animal of less size, emotional, and anxious disposition. So we're going to be able to raise a lot more diversity in livestock. And it's 10 acres. There's just more to work with. So we're really looking forward to doing, particularly, I would love to do waterfowl classes. I feel like the past 2 years, I kind of put myself through another job, harvesting job, through a crash course in rightly harvesting waterfowl. And I feel like we've really landed on some really great ways to do it that are artful, that yield a complete and a beautiful carcass. And which is not common with waterfowl. They're very difficult. They are a challenge on the harvesting end of things. And so I look forward to doing more geese and duck classes in particular. So that, and then of course beef.
I know.
I'm really excited to do beef.
Yeah.
Not only because I need to eat it, and the butter, but I love the opportunity to build the soil with the cows and the way they treat it, and It'll be great. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone who's joined us so far and gotten through some of this podcast with us. We'll try to connect back very early in October. Once we're landed, once we get internet, we need to get internet up and running at our new place. That's, it's going to take some transition time, but thank you for your well wishes and your prayers, and hopefully you can keep in touch. Sign up for our membership. Brandon's still going to do the monthly Facebook live chats, and the classes are scheduled. So, our podcasting is probably going to be limited in the next month or two, but it has been for the last few months. So, thanks, Meat Smiths, for listening to our take on all things meat making, householding, and culture keeping.